Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Liver Canada's webinar tonight on the role of nutrition in managing and preventing liver disease. My name is Ashley Lawrence, and I'm the Digital Communications Coordinator here at Liver Canada, and I will be the host and the moderator for this webinar this evening. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be available on our website at liver.ca, as well as our organization's YouTube page in the upcoming days if you wanted to reference it in the future. Just before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land in which Liver Canada is located. Liver Canada is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, and Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. We acknowledge and extend our gratitude and respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable contributions. For those of you who may not be familiar with Liver Canada, I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of who we are and what we do. Liver Canada was established first in 1969 and was the first organization in the world created to help people with liver disease. We are committed to promoting liver health and improving the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of liver disease through our 4 core pillars of research, education, patient support, and advocacy. I'd now like to introduce our wonderful speaker, Anisha. Anisha is a registered dietitian, chef, liver disease expert focusing on a weight-neutral approach to health with a passion for helping clients improve their relationship with food. She also helps clients with the prevention and management of many other health conditions, including diabetes, MASLD, and general health and well-being. She combines her culinary experience and nutrition expertise to provide clients with an evidence-based yet delicious recommendations that are in line with their unique dietary and cultural needs. Anisha is very passionate about helping those living with liver disease understand how nutrition can help manage their condition, as well as navigate nutrition misinformation. Just before we begin the webinar this evening, we're going to launch a poll just to gain your insights and your previous knowledge on nutrition and liver health to help us evaluate the effectiveness of this webinar. So I'm just going to launch these now, and I'll give you a few minutes to complete them, the questions. I'll just give about 30 more seconds. Amazing. Thank you so much for participating in our polls this evening. So as for our agenda today we will begin with a presentation from Anisha about nutrition and liver health. And then after the presentation is finished, we'll administer a final poll just to gather your feedback on the webinar. Just as a reminder, please feel free to use the Zoom chat feature to ask your questions during the presentation, and note that these questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of this session today. Just as a reminder that we ask you to stay on mute for the rest of the webinar, and we thank you again for joining us this evening. And I now invite Anisha to share her slides.
Let me just get set up here. Where are we? There we go. Okay, thank you so much, Ashley, for in that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm very excited to be able to share with you all a little bit more about food's impact on your liver. So, just a brief overview of what I'll be talking about this evening. So, we'll be talking a little bit about nutrition in the liver, diet do's and don'ts, some meal planning made easy, eating well while eating out, shopping smarter, not harder, some resource recommendations, and then just a few key points at the end for you guys to recap. So, how does food impact your liver? A lot of people know that it does, but not everyone knows how it does. So there are a lot of different ways that the food that you eat impacts your liver. Everything from your liver processing the nutrients from your food, your liver detoxing your body. It's your natural filter. So anything that you eat and drink goes through your liver. The liver can store excess fat, whether that comes from dietary fat or fatty buildup from other health conditions. And the liver can be overworked by kind of the wrong foods or drinks, especially with drinking too much alcohol. Alcohol can cause fatty buildup in the liver, but sometimes eating too many calories or eating a lot of foods high in saturated fats or sugars can also cause fatty buildup in the liver. So, what are the things that we can do to support our liver with our diet? There are actually a lot of things, as you can see, that we can do that will really help benefit the liver just in the things that you eat every day. So, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, having fruits and vegetables be at least half of your meal, whether that's in on a plate, in a stew, in a soup, stir fry, just trying to make sure that some combination of what you're eating is going to be fruits and vegetables at every meal where possible. Obviously, that might not always be possible, but just trying to aim for that goal usually will mean that you'll be eating a variety of fruits and vegetables and enough fiber throughout the day. Next is focusing on protein. So eating lean proteins and plant proteins. So when we're talking about lean animal proteins, things like chicken, turkey, seafood, fish, lean cuts of pork, and then very occasionally things like red meat, and very, very occasionally things like a processed meat or a deli meat, as those can have higher amounts of things that maybe we don't want for the liver. We're looking at eating plant proteins. That can be anything from lentils, beans, tempeh, tofu, things like edamame or other soy products. There are a lot of vegetarian versions or vegan versions of real meat products, such as burgers. Those are also fine if you are vegetarian and craving something red meat-esque. But due to the high amount of processing with those products, I generally would recommend eating them about as often as you would eat something like a steak or a burger. So on occasion, but not all the time. Next, we would want to talk about carbs. So eating whole grains or complex carbs, things with some fiber and nutrition in them. So when we're looking at whole grains, we can look at things like oats, whole wheat, quinoa, brown rice, corn, things like that. Some other carb options that can also be high in fiber that might, potentially fall into the kind of double whole grains and fruits and vegetables category can be things like corn, as I mentioned, or things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, certain root vegetables as well can give you kind of a balance between some healthy carbs and some fiber, which is one of the things that I put down at the bottom is trying to get enough fiber. But before we get there, thinking about healthy fats as well, because fat can be bad for you, or you can have too much fat, and that can cause fatty buildup in the liver in some people. But really, what we want to focus on is healthy fats because everyone does need some amount of fat in their life, in their diet. Things like olive oil, avocado, fatty fish, nuts, seeds. Those are all going to actually support your liver, and those are going to be healthy fats that improve or contribute to the prevention of liver disease. When we're talking about fiber, obviously, a lot of the things that I just talked about will have some level of fiber. But how much fiber do we actually need? For most adults, it's between 25 and 30 grams per day. A lot of people are not getting nearly that much, and it can be really challenging for a lot of people to get that much if they're not making a conscious effort to do so. But doing things like making half of your plate fruits and vegetables really focusing on whole grains and then incorporating the lean proteins or plant proteins and healthy fats into your diet can really help make it more achievable to reach somewhere around this goal. It's not maybe going to happen every day, but that is generally the aim that we want to be going for on average. So, what are some of the diet don'ts? I say this with a caveat because obviously everything in moderation can be pretty okay for you. One of those exceptions is generally alcohol because that can be quite detrimental to liver health, especially. But when we're looking at kind of what we are trying to avoid, for the most part, things like saturated fat. So limiting saturated fat to around 20 grams per day. Doesn't mean you have to cut it out altogether, but we want to limit these things to make sure that we're making room for all of those nutrient dense, fiber rich options that we talked about in the last slide. Another thing that can sometimes contribute to liver disease is too much sugar. So limiting added sugar to 30 grams a day. This isn't necessarily sugar that's going to be coming from fruit or dairy products. This is things coming from processed items or added sugar to things like coffee, tea, soft drinks, things like that, where you maybe don't even realize how much sugar you're having because it's already incorporated into something else, but it can have a detrimental effect on your liver. Another thing that I'm sure many people are aware of, as this has been quite popular along with sugar in a lot of media, is not adding too much salt. So limiting salt to 2,300 milligrams a day. That's kind of the general recommended average. Some people are going to have higher or lower sodium restrictions depending on potentially other health conditions that they have. But that for most people is kind of the average limit that we want to be reaching for a day. So, how can you kind of minimize your added salt? When you're cooking, you can not add any salt to your food. If you don't have any kidney issues, you can maybe look at a salt substitute if you're really finding that you need that saltiness. You can incorporate other foods that have umami or kind of a salty aftertaste into the food that you're already cooking so that you're not adding just extra salt. And there are, lots of herbs and spices that people can use where you're not really missing the salt, adding some extra flavor, adding some heat, some acid, some healthy fats might really help round out a dish without you necessarily having to add a teaspoon of salt just because the recipe calls for it. So something I talked about on the last slide in terms of lean proteins and things that we might want to limit with certain proteins would be things like processed meats. So bacon, ham, deli meats, as well as some red meats. A lot of steaks or burgers, those can often have a lot of saturated fats in them. So looking at that limit of saturated fat when you're considering your protein options is important. And so limiting processed meats to, on average, twice a month. For most people, it's pretty doable. If you can do less, that's even better. But this seems to be a pretty realistic way to go for most people. And then another thing that can actually be detrimental to your health, which a lot of people don't realize, is long periods of fasting. So when I'm talking about long periods of fasting, this isn't overnight, when you're sleeping, or, my day got away from me and I forgot to eat lunch. I'm talking about some people who tend to go on fasts for, say, 24 plus hours or even 16 hours at a time. Quite a long time. That is longer than the average if you were, just running around or if you were sleeping, because that can impact a lot of other systems in your body that can then impact your liver. So things like the amount of sleep you get, can your body restore itself and regenerate properly? Your focus and your mood, those things being impacted can sometimes lead you to reach for processed snacks or, something that's going to give you that quick fix of sugar or energy in a simple carb or like that fatty, satisfaction that might not actually be that great for your liver. So thinking about trying to eat regularly when possible can actually have an overall benefit for your liver and for your overall health because it means that your body isn't going into any kind of state of starvation or stress because of a lack of energy. And then I've mentioned this a couple of times, but consuming too much alcohol. We definitely do not want to be drinking too much alcohol. And the guidelines for this have changed in the last couple of years, going from, 10 to 15 drinks a week to now 2 drinks a week. There has been more research to show that alcohol actually has a lot bigger an impact on the liver and on the body than previously thought. And so, really limiting it to 2 drinks a week for a low risk is really important. And if you have a liver disease, eliminating alcohol completely. There are lots of mocktails and low calorie drinks out there where you can still enjoy, festive season celebrations or even just, a Friday or Saturday night without having that detrimental impact on your liver and, feeling rested the next day. Your sleep isn't impacted, your focus is better, your mood is better the next day. You're not dealing with that hangover. So really just trying to be mindful of alcohol consumption can also be something that's key for liver health. So, some more recommended habits and fad diets to avoid. There are a few. Recommended habits, honestly, keep it simple. Things like Canada's plate model, which has, half your plate is fruits and vegetable, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs, some healthy fats thrown in. That is really, really simple. Excuse me. The Mediterranean diet is another one that really focuses on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, seafood, fatty fish, lean proteins, healthy fats. A plant-forward diet, not completely plant-based if that's not what you want, but a plant-forward diet can be a really great way to increase your fiber if that's something that's of, concern, or you're not feeling like you're getting enough based on that 25 to 30 grams that we talked about earlier. And generally just a whole foods diet. So focusing on, am I cooking from, scratch where possible? Am I eating whole foods rather than a lot of processed, prepackaged, pre-made items where you know what's going into it a little bit more? And then some things to avoid. And these are common things that are seen in the media and potentially even, recommended by other medical professionals that maybe don't always have the same nutrition um, education that, they might see in the media and think, well, maybe give it a go. But things like very low calorie diets, so really restrictive diets can actually put your body into a higher level of stress. So if weight loss is something that you're looking at, then obviously work based on your individual needs. But generally, overly restrictive diets can actually have the opposite effect of what you're looking for. And so making sure that really what you're making are sustainable life changes that you can sustain over a very long time will actually be more beneficial, not only for your goals, but for your body and your liver in the long run. Focusing on really high fat, low carb diets. And the reason I mention this is because a lot of kind of keto or low carb diets tend to focus on a lot of animal proteins and that saturated fat. And that's really what we actually don't want for our liver. So focusing on healthy oils, healthy unsaturated fats like nuts, olive oil, seeds, fatty fish, those kind of things is what is going to support the liver. But things like a lot of butter, lard, tallow, bacon grease, things like that can actually have quite a detrimental effect to the liver because they are saturated fats, and that can lead to some of that fatty buildup on the liver, which we are trying to avoid. Restrictive diets like paleo or carnivore, the reason I mention these is because often they are quite low in fruits and vegetables. Kind of the same with keto or low carb diets is a lot of that fiber is removed from the diet, and that not only keeps us regular and full and helps our gut, but it really helps keep you feeling satiated after a meal along with the protein. So having enough fiber is really important to feel like you've had a good meal when you're done. So that's why those kind of diets often tend to leave people feeling quite hungry. Or if you're not feeling hungry, it may be because you've been having a really high calorie diet. Things like juice cleanses and detoxes can be quite popular, especially as like a liver detox, a kidney detox, a gut detox, things like that. Often these are, again, very restrictive. There's sometimes people trying to sell you certain products. None of those have been scientifically reviewed and approved. So they may have been reviewed, but they're probably not approved. And that is why often they're not recommended by medical professionals because there isn't a scientific backing for them. So focusing more on these recommended habits will help get all of, anything that you need out of your body because your liver is your body's natural filter. So it will do all of the detoxing for you as long as you are keeping it in good shape. So, meal planning is an especially useful tool when we're looking at trying to, you know, plan good meals to support our liver, support our health overall. And so there doesn't have to be overly complicated ways to do this. Look at the recipes that you like and see which ones of those kind of fit into or that you can make fit into a liver healthy diet in some of those ways that we talked about earlier. If you're feeling adventurous, you can try new cuisines and look for recipes that will support liver health through things like um, high fruits and vegetable content, protein, um, all of the things that we talked about, healthy fats. And then, kind of with that half a plate of fruits and vegetable model, focusing on the ratio. So, whatever kind of meal you're making, even if can't think, is this half fruits and vegetables? Is this a quarter this? Is this a quarter that? Focus on parts. So did I put kind of twice as much vegetables in as I did lean proteins and complex carbs? Great, you're on the right track. If you're thinking, maybe not, then, potentially look at how you can increase or readjust those to try and fit better into a liver healthy diet. When you're cooking things at home, trying to use, you know, oils like olive oil or even potentially, things like avocado oil, because those can be quite healthy and support your liver health rather than using things like butter. And then, as I mentioned, don't forget herbs and spices, as those can really help flavor your food. A lot of cuisines around the world really focus on using herbs and spices, marinades. A lot of marinades will call for things like olive oil. You can use vinegars, you can use lemon, you can use all kinds of things. Greek yogurt is often a common marinade that can be quite good for you. And use those really instead of salt and sugar as your main spices or main seasonings to try and reduce the amount of added salt and sugar that you're having in your meals. And then if you're just having something simple, you can also use condiments on top of whatever you've made. So things like vinegars, mustards, other kind of low calorie sauces. Just because if you are trying to be mindful of that, you can um, sometimes that can get away from you. But if that's not a concern, then use, whatever sauces and, condiments that you like. But just watch out for those salt and sugar additives because a lot of them will have those included. So, some more kind of tips that you can use before you actually go to the grocery store. Check your pantry and freezer, see what you already have, because oftentimes people might forget what's already in their house. And so before you go to the grocery store, see what you have, see what meals you've decided to make, and see what you actually need to buy. Sometimes you do need to buy most of the stuff for the meal, but oftentimes you might have an extra can of beans lying in the back of the cupboard or an extra tin of tomatoes lying in the back of the cupboard, or, maybe some frozen vegetables that you could use in your dish. And that might make things not only cheaper, but easier for you when you're planning and, free up some space in your house as well. Make a list. Everyone has probably fallen into the trap of going grocery shopping hungry or going grocery shopping without a list, and you end up with lots of stuff that maybe you didn't plan on buying or don't need. And so making a list can help you just stay on track about what it is you are needing to buy for the meals that you're making for the week. So another thing that I find helpful is working around my weekly activities, but not over planning it. So I might, on a 7-day work week, try and plan 4 or 5 dinners, knowing that maybe there are a couple nights a week that, I go out for dinner with a friend, or I might end up, doing something later in the evening where making dinner at that particular time isn't helpful. Or maybe I have extra leftovers that I didn't anticipate on having, and now I'm going to have leftovers for dinner. So don't over plan, but try and make sure that you've got a good plan based on the activities that you know are happening. Mixing and matching can be a little bit easier if you're kind of feeling a bit stuck or overwhelmed. So picking a few proteins, a few carbs, some vegetables, fruits, And then some sort of dip. If you're a dip person, I tend to like Greek yogurt as a dip with some, herbs and spices and kind of jazz it up. And some high fiber snacks. And then you can kind of create whatever you'd like out of that, really. It doesn't have to be the same every week because that gets boring. But even if, you tend to be a chicken person, you can try and, do a different carb or maybe some different vegetables, a different sauce. Things like that can help just keep it a little bit more interesting. These are just some meal ideas that I put together that I thought might be helpful for people. So, breakfast ideas can be anything from Greek yogurt, scrambled eggs, smoothie bowls, overnight oats. You can do protein pancakes. There are a lot of good protein pancake recipes out there that use like banana and oats and protein powder, things like that. If protein is really a big goal for you, you could do frittata, egg bites. But something that you'll notice is all of these will have some sort of fruit, a whole grain, and a protein. And that is because we're really trying to mimic that model, that ratio 2-1-1, getting some fiber, some healthy fats, some, complex carbs, and some protein in there. Some lunch ideas can be anything from tuna or chicken salad. I often do kind of what I call an adult Lunchable, which is like a low-fat cheese with some veggie sticks, seed crackers, and like some sort of dip. You can do a sandwich with some veggie sticks. You can do soup. I like to blend beans into a lot of my soups because they kind of just like melt away. And then it adds that extra fiber, extra protein. It's great. You could do, a burrito or a burrito bowl. You could do a tofu grain bowl. It really depends on what your tastes are and what it is that you like. But these are just kind of some inspiration ideas for everyone. Roast chicken with usually some sort of potato and some sort of green is one of my favorite dinners because it's quick, it's easy. Um, I say quick in that I can just kind of set it and forget it for, 45 minutes or an hour, and then I can come back and, my chicken's done and everything's delicious and ready to eat. Mushroom and lentil tacos, I recently discovered these are very good. Um, Things like lemon salmon, you could do a chickpea curry, a different kind of burrito if you want. If you're feeling like something comforting, something like a whole wheat pasta, some kind of lean protein meatball. I love throwing frozen green peas or doing a green pea pesto with frozen green peas as an easy way to add some extra fiber, some extra protein. Or you could do kind of a, pseudo fried fish vibe with like a panko crusted fish and a roasted veggie of some kind. So I mentioned high fiber snacks earlier. These are kind of some of my ideas for high fiber snacks. Say that 5 times fast. So things like popcorn, nuts and seeds, roasted chickpeas or edamame beans. These are quite popular these days. You can find them pretty much anywhere. You can make your own or find oat energy bites. If you do buy them at the grocery store, just watch out for that added sugar because oftentimes there is a lot of added sugar in those. You could do something like a seed cracker and nut butter or a veggie stick and dip vibe. Trail mix. I tend to make my own trail mix because then everything I want is in there. It's pretty easy. And honestly, I find that it's usually cheaper because if you're buying nuts and seeds in bulk and then just kind of putting it together yourself, it is a lot cheaper than just buying a bag. And then when we're looking at eating out, because everyone's going to go out to dinner, everyone's going to go out for a celebration every once in a while. It happens, but how can we kind of stick to our health goals while we're doing that? So looking for heart healthy options. A lot of menus these days will have some sort of symbol that is maybe, heart healthy or healthy, something like that. You can look for those options and see which ones appeal to you and maybe go for one of those. If they don't have that, that's also, happens. But maybe looking to swap fries for a salad where possible. Or maybe, you and someone else that you're going out with, one of you gets salad, one of you gets fries, and you split it. And then that way you're getting a little bit of both if that's something that you're really craving. You can ask for salad dressings or sauces on the side, and then you can control how much you want. I find that often salads are very overdressed at restaurants, so I do that anyway. But that's just me. Um, if there are low sodium options, or if you do have, a higher sodium restriction, You can certainly ask for low sodium options for from your server, or ask for no added salt from your server for them to tell the kitchen. You could try a vegetarian or fish option, which often are a little bit healthier, a little bit less fried or greasy, and often come with a little bit more fiber. And then, kind of in that same vein, if you're getting something like chicken or fish, you could try grilled or baked instead of fried. It usually gives you a very delicious result because their goal is so make food delicious, but it does have less oil, less, added calories, things like that, if that's something that you're worried about. And then I try and choose water as a beverage as often as possible, not only for hydration, because that's quite important, but also because we do want to limit our alcohol content. And alcohol is expensive, especially when you're going out. So water is always a good choice. And then, really, in the end, everyone makes their own choices. Everyone wants to celebrate the way that they want to. Don't stress about it too much. Be flexible. Try and figure out what's going to be the most reasonable option that you have available to you wherever you are, that still kind of aligns with those goals that we talked about at the beginning. And then, kind of the same with events or parties. I'm thinking, if you go to someone's house, try and look for some higher protein options like chicken, fish, plant proteins, things like that. Find the veggie platter and try and make that half your plate. That will help you really have a visual for how much of everything that you're eating. If there are fried foods and you really want to try them, just try and limit them to smaller portions, because that way you know that you're still making room for all of those other high fiber, high nutrient options, but you're still getting that little bit of satisfaction. And oftentimes people have fruit, so if you can, choose fruit as a dessert. But, sometimes you want a little sweet treat, and that kind of comes into that fried foods portion too. Try and make it smaller, try and have more fruit, get that sweet treat, but, also the fiber and the nutrients. Again, water is a beverage because hydration is important and we want to limit our alcohol. And really just try and enjoy the time with loved ones, because if we're really stressed about our food choices, that can sometimes lead to just overall body stress, and that's not super great for us overall. So try not to stress too much about, if you're being perfect. Really, the goal is good enough. This is helpful if you are someone who is potentially not as versed in label reading. This is a really helpful breakdown, at least I have found when I was learning how to read labels properly, about how to kind of have a quick glance at whether or not you might want to buy something. So the percent of items on a food label refers to how much of that nutrient is included relative to how much the daily amount that is recommended for, generally it's an adult, is. So when you're reading a label, these are kind of some percentages and numbers, ranges to keep in mind. So 5% or less means that it is a small amount. So that's usually the goal if there is saturated fat, sodium, sugar, things like that. We want to keep that low. If you're looking between 5 and 15%, somewhere in that range, that's usually considered like a medium amount. And so in that case, I would kind of consider the nutrients in the overall product. Is there, a lower amount of things like saturated fat and sodium? Is there a higher amount of vitamins and minerals? You can kind of gauge that based on your own needs, preferences, etc. If we're looking at 15% or more, that's generally considered a large amount. So that's really great if you're getting a large amount of vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, things like that, things that we really want to encourage. Things that we want to limit at 15% or more would be things like salt, sugar, saturated fats, kind of the same thing that we've been talking about. But the 5 to 15 kind of chart here is generally what I would teach clients or teach people if they are looking how to label read kind of from the beginning, because that can kind of give you a good guide as to how to generally approach whether or not you want to buy something. So looking at some grocery myths when we're trying to shop smarter and not harder. So some myths include, that you might have heard, only shop the perimeter of the store, that you don't need a list, that you only can buy organic, or that you can only buy things like gluten-free, paleo, keto. and that eating healthy is expensive. I do understand that the cost of groceries is quite high, but hopefully some of these tips will help you in, if not reducing, controlling your grocery costs. However, when we're thinking about things like only shop the perimeter of the grocery store, things like whole grains, plant proteins, healthy fats, those are usually a lot of the time in the aisles. We want to go into those aisles. It just matters which aisles we go into. So, usually there's signs. And so you can kind of gauge which aisles you need to try and find the things that are on your list. Because meal planning with a list definitely helps for both budget and nutrition. Non-organic is just as nutritious as organic, as is canned, as is frozen. When we're thinking about on a budget, canned fruits and vegetables, fruits just watch out for whether or not they're in syrup, and vegetables watch out for if they have a lot of added sodium. But those can be very nutritious. Frozen fruits and vegetables are usually frozen at peak freshness and ripeness, and so they're actually quite high in the nutrients that they usually have. So if those are what are more available to you, I really recommend going for them. If that's going to help you get enough fruits and vegetables in the day, that's what you should be going for. Organic doesn't always mean more nutritious. It is more so a marketing idea than it is a nutrition idea. But if organic is what you prefer or what you have access to, then that is certainly, the way that you can choose to go. Don't necessarily fall for fad diets that tell you you need to be on some kind of diet. If you need to buy gluten-free, absolutely do. Some people are celiac, some people are intolerant. It's the same with dairy-free or other intolerances or allergies. But if you do not have those intolerances or allergies, there isn't usually a reason that you would need to buy that kind of specificity on a product. And kind of like I mentioned, using budget-friendly sales, using frozen or canned items, those can all help control the cost of your groceries. And so if you're looking for some resources, there are a lot. The Liver Canada's got lots of resources. They've got their recipes page, they've got their Healthy Liver Pantry. The Canada's Food Guide website also has a recipe section if you're looking for some Canada's Food Guide approved recipes. They're actually quite good. I've tried a couple of them myself. They are very good. And if you're looking for kind of grocery app, excuse me, these are some of the ones that I like. So Flip, potentially a lot of people have heard of Flip. You can shop flyers on the app. So flyers from a bunch of different grocery stores. You can find deals. Too Good To Go both have restaurants, bakeries, but they also have grocery stores. And often grocery stores are giving away fresh produce at the end of the day. And so you can get fresh produce at a huge discount from that app as well. As with Food Hero, you can save on any extra groceries that grocery stores may have. And some grocery stores have their own apps, and you can shop specific deals for the stores that you often go to or that are in your area. Some people benefit from food journaling. Food journaling can help you understand your food habits, can help you keep track of things like nutrients or calories consumed in a day. That being said, that it might not be for everyone because everyone has a different relationship with food. It can help you keep track of meals that you commonly eat. So maybe you don't realize what you often go for. Maybe some food journaling can help you realize what you usually go for and either continue those in your repertoire or adjust those slightly to meet more of the liver healthy guidelines. If you're looking for food journaling apps, things like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal are quite common. If you're looking for those that are non-weight loss focused, things like apps like Rise Up and Recover, Eat, and See How You Eat tend to focus on other aspects of food journaling that are not weight focused, which can be very helpful for a lot of people. So just going over some key points that we have talked about, because I have thrown a lot of information at you guys. So as we know, nutrition is key for a healthy liver and a healthy body. Eating a healthy diet is generally easier than you think. So when meal planning, eating out, etc., focusing on fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains and complex carbs, healthy fats, and limiting things like saturated fat, salt, and sugar, especially when shopping and reading labels, can be quite helpful. And then, using things like new recipes, grocery apps, or food journaling can help you stay on track. That is it from me, and I am happy to turn it back over to Ashley. I think we're doing questions after the poll.
Yes, amazing. Thank you, Anisha, for sharing such valuable information. I know that everyone here today is very grateful for all of the information and tips that you shared this evening. So we're just going to jump into the final polls for this session, just to go over the knowledge you've gained from this session, as well as your feedback for this webinar. So I'm just going to launch these polls. Give you just a few minutes to answer those. I'll give about 30 more seconds. Amazing. Thank you so much for participating in our polls. Just going to share my screen again quickly. Amazing. So now we are in the Q&A session for this webinar, where I will ask the questions that you ask in the chat to Anisha, and she will give her expert response. I know we have some people who have already asked questions, so I'm going to scroll up and ask those to Anisha first. Okay, so what recommendation to fast, especially if you are diabetic and have fatty liver? Example, how many hours?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, every person's going to be different with that. So I can't necessarily give like personalized health advice because you're not a client or patient of mine. But generally for both fatty liver and diabetes, fasting for too long isn't recommended, only because it can impact blood sugar control, especially. And so trying to eat at regular intervals, usually 3 meals a day and sometimes a couple of snacks in between, can be quite helpful. Focusing on things like fiber and protein for both of those conditions is really going to help support your health with those conditions.
Amazing. Our next question is, what is the healthiest of the cooking oils?
I wouldn't say there's necessarily like the healthiest or the unhealthiest. Generally, oils that are liquid at room temperature are going to be in that healthy oil category. Uh, One of the, I guess, major oils that I would kind of limit would be coconut oil, and that is because it is actually a saturated fat. It's solid at room temperature, just like butter or lard or something like that would be. And so using it in that same way would be more appropriate. But using things like olive oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, Those can all have the health kind of benefits that you're looking for. Things like olive oil or avocado oil can give you a bit more flavor, but if you're doing something that maybe is at a higher heat, something like a vegetable oil, or if you're baking something like a vegetable oil, it might be more useful.
Kind of in line with that, is there an alternative to butter or margarine for baking? If not, is butter or margarine better for liver health?
So, I mean, butter and margarine have their place in baking, absolutely. There are alternatives for those fats. In a lot of recipes, you or a lot of types of baking, you can find recipes that will use a vegetable oil or an olive oil in place of butter, which will give you those healthy fats. Sometimes things like oil and applesauce or a mashed banana or something to add a little bit of fiber and reduce the overall fat content can be helpful. I would look for recipes though specific to that, just because with baking, especially if you start changing too many things around, it can kind of mess with the end result. And so you want to just make sure that the recipes that you're using are made and tested with that in mind.
Amazing. The next one is there a role for prebiotics in liver care?
So, prebiotics and probiotics are different. Prebiotics are basically the fiber that you would be getting from things like whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. That kind of helps feed your gut bacteria and promote gut health. And so if you're getting enough fiber through your diet, then it's not usually necessary. If you're really struggling to get fiber, then introducing a prebiotic would be something that I would talk to a dietitian who can work with you one-on-one to implement properly.
The next question is, what does an average day look like to get 30 grams of protein?
So getting 30 grams of protein actually isn't necessarily that difficult. I'm not sure if you meant 30 grams of fiber or 30 grams of protein. But I can kind of go both. So in terms of 30 grams of protein, that's kind of between 20 and 30 grams of protein is generally what I aim for and what I advise a lot of clients to aim for, like at each meal. So that could be something like a portion of chicken or a portion of another lean meat. It could be, a portion of um, potentially like lentils and a whole grain, because whole grains usually have some fiber in them. At a mealtime, it can be like a low-fat cheese and some seed crackers. There are different ways that you can get between 20 and 30 grams of protein at a meal. That is kind of one of the things that you might want to look at the labels of what you're buying at just to see how much protein is in a portion and portioning that accordingly. Fiber can be a little bit more difficult. So trying to do that kind of half of your plate of fruits and vegetables can be helpful in kind of moving quite close to that goal. Some people find that if they're eating maybe slightly lower fiber fruits and vegetables, which are still really helpful for all of their other nutrients, but maybe they're not quite getting to that goal. Maybe a couple higher fiber snacks throughout the day can help with that. So some of the ones that I had listed earlier in my presentation, adding some of those in can sometimes help you reach your fiber goal. I like to tend to track my fiber intake if I'm feeling like I'm really struggling to get that, but that's an individual choice about whether or not that makes sense for you, based on your own personal needs, basically.
Great. The next question is, do you have recommendations for meal planning, either an app or a website?
So if you're looking at um, meal planning, I don't personally use apps or websites for it. I tend to just like I honestly, this is how I do it, is I keep a master list on my phone of all of the meals that I tend to like that I know are in line with my health goals, especially in supporting my fiber and protein goals. And so I will kind of pick and choose from that list based on what I'm feeling like that week, what I've got going on, what the grocery store prices are like, quite honestly, what my freezer space is like, things like that. Um, but if you find a tool that works for you, then absolutely use it. Because that will just make your life that much easier, honestly.
The next question is there a liver recipe book or cookbook? I'm just going to jump in before you answer, Anisha. On our
Yeah.
new website on liver.ca, we do have a new recipe page, which is very easy to navigate. We have it divided into different snacks, breakfast, lunch, dinner, desserts. So you can kind of search by what recipes you're exactly looking for. We also have a liver healthy pantry, which is a printable cookbook per se of our liver friendly recipes as well. So I just wanted to add that in before Anisha answered this question.
Oh, that was basically what I was going to recommend. The Liver Canada
Amazing.
resources are fantastic. The Canada's Food Guide resources are fantastic. Um, those are kind of my go-to um recipe outlets, I guess. But also, if you're looking for like an actual cookbook, generally like Mediterranean diet type cookbooks are going to have a lot of liver-friendly recipes because it is kind of the same principles of focusing on um, fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, complex carbs and whole grains, and lean proteins. So, if you're looking for like a physical cookbook beyond the fantastic resources that Liver Canada has, that would probably be my recommendation.
Amazing. I think that's all the questions we have for today. If anyone comes up with any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to us at Liver Canada, and we'll try our best to answer your questions. We also might ask Anisha for her expertise as well in answering those.
Me too.
Um, yes. So that concludes our webinar for this evening. I'd like to take the time now to thank our expert Anisha for such a great conversation around nutrition and liver health, as well as the listeners and our Liver Canada community for tuning in. As mentioned at the beginning, this will be available on our YouTube page in the upcoming days. And just to learn more about liver health or to find out more about Liver Canada, please feel free to visit our website at liver.ca, as well as follow us on social media as well for the most up-to-date information and liver health tips. I want to thank you all again for coming and have a safe and wonderful evening.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.